give you a brief history of permeable paving in Charles Sturt, where we've been using it for quite a while, not quite the uptake of Mitcham and West Torrens. Predominantly used in roadways, not too many in footpaths, and usually near the coast due to the sandy soils. Again, the education and the research that's coming out of Mitcham particularly, that's starting to sway upper levels of the organisation, but originally that's a bit of that fear about reactive soils. Usually for reducing gutter flow widths, nuisance ponding, maintaining water infiltration for trees when we're formalising laneways or car parks, and soakage systems where there's no, again, when formalising laneways and there's no nearby drainage. It is becoming more frequent. We've got about 4 projects next year, some major streetscapes where we're implementing numerous permeable paving treatments, a little bit of a trial, but yeah, just trying to increase the uptake. So I'll run through a few different examples. This is Kirkcaldy Avenue. This is probably our oldest one. It's about 22 years old, built back in 1999. So this is basically parking bays. Intent was to reduce gutter flow widths and that little bit of ponding in the roadway in smaller rain events without having to extend a stormwater main about 150 metres up the road. The design reflects that. As you can see, it actually falls away from left to right, so away from the road. So it holds about 40 mil of water over the length of the parking bays, and then that slowly soaks in. Any excess in those large rain events carries on down the road. So this is 80 mil Marlboro hydropave on about 150 mil of screenings. So maintenance of this, it's swept about 5 times a year as part of the general road network. Over time, there has been some decrease in performance. Now that's just fairly subjective based on some council employees noticing a slight difference in how long it takes to soak away. Serviceability-wise, no complaints received, but as you can see in the photo, if someone is parked in the parking bay and it rains, they come back to their car, they do have to contend with about 40 mil of water. So that's just something to consider when you're designing these systems is, you know, what happens when the water does get held there. There is a bit of moss build-up in the joints, so we did basically just a high-pressure clean. It's about a day's labour, about $1,000, and we're just continuing to monitor that. So like I said, that's 22 years old, scheduled for renewal in another 10 years, but we'll just monitor it and see what happens. Similar thing, Wilson Court. This was constructed in 2012. Basically in the right-hand side of this photo, just along here, that's previously where the curb and gutter was. You can see the mature Norfolk pine trees there. With the amount of leaf litter they dropped, there was a lot of blockage of that curb and gutter. So we actually changed it to an outfall. That now falls away to the road, and you can see the new spoon drain just next to Wilson Court there. And we went with Permeable to maintain the water infiltration around the structural root zone of the trees. Yeah, and they're 80 mil eco lock on about 300 mil of screenings. So quite a thick pavement on that one. Again, about 5 times a year sweeping with some additional reactive if people are ringing up. Probably one of the biggest issues we have here is it's a high car park usage at all times. It's next to the bowling club, it's right near a school, so it's busy pretty much all day, every day, not quite 24/7, but very, very busy. So it's very difficult for our street sweeper to get in there and actually do a thorough sweep. There are some areas where the residents actually maintain, and you'll see a photo of that soon, but there's moss and there are a lot of Norfolk pine needles blocking up the gaps just because we can't get in there with the sweeper. So we actually did, again, high pressure clean it out. Due to the extent it was about 2 days. We've added it to our car park mini sweeping program. Should have been from the start, but again, one of those things, didn't get handed over to operations as it should, so there's a learning there. And we just continue to monitor it. And we've actually had to replace one of the Norfolk pines that collapsed in some wind, so that's a new one there, so that'll benefit and grow quite rapidly. So we'll continue to monitor this, and we may need to do some targeted refurbishment of just to lift and relay some sections. Duke Lane, Semaphore Park, 2010. This actually falls away from the right to the left, much like the example that Andrew used. There's no formal drainage within about 300 metres of this. Stormwater from the houses is discharging to the laneway. So the intent here is purely just to provide drainage via soakage. This one, not maintained at all. No one has swept it, looked at it, touched it since 2010. Again, asset handover, key. So when we actually went out there, had a look, no reported issues, and it is, as you can see in that photo there, functioning fantastically. So minimal, there's a little bit of moss, but not much. We put that down to there's no overhanging trees, and it does get quite a large vehicle volume. There's about 5 or 6 houses down there that are quite frequent with their car usage. So sometimes you don't have to maintain these assets and you do get lucky. Lane 30, Simon's baby. We call it Anthony Street Lane. So this was, constructed in 2010. Again, provide drainage for a 1 in 5 event via soakage to prevent flooding of about several properties down there. It's 80mm eco lock and quite a shallow pavement grading, as you can see. It's a laneway, not a high traffic load, this one. That's what it looked like shortly after construction, nice and pristine. Swept every 6 months. Received a resident complaint in mid-2018 that their property or the rear of their yard was being flooded because their water wasn't draining away at the low point, and they suspected it was due to the blockage that you can just see it there. There's quite a few large trees that were dropping a lot of leaf litter, including the fine little nuts that were getting into the gaps. Sent our field crews out there after another rain event, and they went out there, basically levered up one paver, and the water drained away within 5 minutes. So it went from 200 ml of water to nothing in 5 minutes. So that confirmed that it was an issue with the gaps being blocked, not the underlying aggregate. Lifted and relayed about 80 square metres right at the low spot. It's the section in red there. Does have the Geofab, so we kept that. Now we know we don't need it, particularly in an environment like this. Or the Geofab, the surface of the 6mm fine filter layer, and trimmed some of the overhanging branches. That tree's since been removed by the owner. That was about $8,000, so it's about $100 a square metre. Probably would have been a little bit less if we had a bit of a larger area, but again, just that small area, you have those costs. We've continued to monitor that, and we haven't had any further issues. Now this isn't permeable paving, but it is something you might consider instead of interlocking pavers. So this is Marlboro Street. It's between Seaview and Military. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it collects a lot of water off of Seaview and then falls down to Military Road. We had some quite extreme gutter widths here, about 3 to 4 metres in some fairly minor rain events. So this was constructed in 2009. This is actually the start of an emu crossing there, so you can imagine when you've got kids and elderly using that, you don't want extreme gutter flow. So this is permeable curb, no fines curb, constructed the length of the protuberance, so you can see you've got some Norfolk pines there as well. Again, this one, no maintenance. I don't have a recent photo of it, but because of the grade and the runoff volume that it gets, it's very self-cleansing in a rain event, so quite fortunate. And gutter flows are down to about 1 metre there as opposed to 3 metres. So no action taken on that one, but again, sometimes you do luck out. This is just around the corner in East Terrace. So again, 2009, the intent was to reduce gutter flows and nuisance ponding. This time, due to concerns over trafficability of the no fines curb, it was only installed adjacent to the trees, as you can see. This one's had quite a few issues. So it's swept 5 times a year and sometimes some additional sweeping. We've had the permeable curb get blocked due to the Norfolk pine leaf litter breaking down, but it's also the leaf litter from the trees falls where the trees are, which is where the permeable curb is, and then the water can't actually reach the permeable curb. So it hasn't done what the intent was, because water can't actually reach where the permeable curb is, as you can see in the right-hand photo. And then in the left, again, because of how mature the trees are, and a bit of that construction methodology, some sections have lifted out of the ground. So we have previously undertaken some high-pressure cleaning, again, about a day's work of that. That was a few years ago. That worked for a little bit. But we are intending next year to replace most of those sections, as well as sections of the curb in between. So that'll help eliminate that ponding. And we're anticipating about $10,000 for that. So, and that's about 100 metres worth of curbing that we're going to be doing. So in conclusion, every location is different. You've got to be aware of your site specifics. Emphasis on maintenance. Proper maintenance will minimise your need for going back in there and premature refurbishment or renewal. Regular monitoring, particularly in your first 12 to 24 months through the seasons, to see if your assumptions are correct, but also just how it is responding to the changing environment and the changing seasons. And that can enable you to adjust your maintenance schedule with either more sweeping, or you might have to allow for a high pressure clean once a year to try and prevent those issues before they arise. If you do need to do refurbishment, often you can just get away with doing small sections to maximise your impact rather than the whole asset. And just consider impacts and consequences of reduced performance at the design stage. So like that first car park, if that soakage is no longer working as well as it is, it's always going to hold that 40 mil of water. So that's just something to consider. That's me.
Hi, it's Martin from DIT. Just a question, with the no fines concrete curbing, do you have an aggregate or like a graded aggregate behind?
So I believe those sections, because of the trees, they wanted to minimise excavation, so they basically just popped the existing curb and put it on there, as opposed to but it's predominantly sandy soil there. So what we found is our old curb, quite often, because of the age, didn't actually have a rubble base underneath. So it's something we're working on to try and find an adequate detail for the future.
Maybe a little off topic. One of those pitches had wheel stops fixed to the permeable pavers. What's a methodology to fixing them in construction? I'm just asking because I've had a job before using permeable pavers, and I had wheel stops within the car park, and the contractor asked, how do we pin these in? I had no idea.
Look, I'll have to take that one on notice. I'm not too familiar with the design of that one. That was a little bit before my time, but I can certainly take that on notice and circulate that with the notes.
Thank you.
Hi, just a question on the photo where the van was in the 40 mil of pooling. Is that something that could be alleviated with a different type of paver, or something which leaches kind of at a more frequent rate, or I guess how could this be solved?
Probably better infiltration of your subgrade. Could possibly also have just increase the capacity. So, larger pavement allows you to store more water, but unfortunately that's basically the aspect of that design. It's designed to hold that 40 mil of water in the parking bay rather than the road. So that's what I'm saying. You've got to consider some of those things. It's doing what it was designed to do, but serviceability-wise, not ideal when it has to hold that water. So, all right.
Thank you. I'm Beck from Resilient East. I was wondering if you had any estimates over the years of maybe the cost of maintenance for permeable paving versus just normal roads, and I guess the tree impact on footpaths and curbs anyway. I use Wilson Court as an example. No change. Our roads get swept 5 times a year. That's the thing. Previously, we've had no additional maintenance, which I suppose is one of the points, is that sometimes you do need more maintenance. But in other times, I'll use Duke Lane. That's had no maintenance, and then that's been fine. So that's had nothing for 11 years now, and it's in reasonable, perfectly working, good condition. Whereas other roads have been swept 5 times in that time. Tree roots, obviously, with impervious surfaces, usually tend to do more damage than permeable surfaces. But we'll just have to wait and see with a few of these. But it can be more beneficial.
it sounds like the context. If you've got a street lined with trees, you need to maintain it. There's no reason for no trees, just for the record.
If I can just add to the answer to that question, particularly with the footpath conversation, does it have hard numbers against it? No. But particularly in the footpath conversation, and this is what we've convinced our senior executive of, even if it costs twice as much to put a permeable treatment in than the conventional, and I guess one of the things I didn't mention in my presentation is the permeable footpath, we're moving more and more towards new trees, so to get that better benefit and advantage over life rather than work around trees that are already causing damage. But even if it costs twice as much to put in, if we save one footpath replacement over what should be the natural life of that footpath, we've paid for the installation. And in many of those locations, anyone that deals with tree lift of footpath or curb knows that you might have a book life of a footpath of 80 years. I'm not the asset manager. 80 years, about right? Close enough. You might have a book life of a footpath of 80 years, but particularly if there's some degree of conflict with trees, it's not unreasonable that every 15 years you're going back and replacing at high cost, because it's patch placement, that footpath. If the permeable, particularly in a line with new tree establishment, is saving you multiple of those, then over the life cycle costing, which Simon talked about beforehand, and that vision beyond just the today, you're actually starting to save big bucks.